Now, in a perfect world, if people were fully educated, had complete knowledge, understood all the consequences, and could easily exercise their preferences, well, we'd have no problem. But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. And that's why we need an event like today's event. What's refreshing about today's speakers is that they have some innovative ideas, cutting-edge theories and research about how people behave and new technological advances to try to address these problems. And so I think that today's is really the beginning of a world of Privacy 2.0. What do we do after notice and choice? And I think today's event will be very enlightening.
So we did a lot of testing with consumers on a couple things, both the presentation of it and what it should say. And we learned a couple things that were, I think, surprising to us. I think the biggest thing that surprised us is we learned from customers that the kind of ubiquitous link where you describe what you're doing in brief terms and then say learn more, they hated that. What consumers said to us is they thought the learn more meant, there's the real story. You're not really telling us what happens with your short statement, that the learn more is the fine print. So it was kind of an interesting take on the layered notice idea that they really didn't like the way that was presented. So what we ended up doing was, I have to find the mouse. Was presenting it without that. It's essentially a layered notice, but it doesn't have, it's not presented in the same way. What we did was these privacy commitments here, which is this very short story, we will not sell your personal information to anyone for any purpose. I'll talk more about that later. These 6 commitments, and then the privacy policy. It's a little longer, but again, you don't have to click to get to it. You can see it right there. And then from there, you have to go down. This is difficult to do because my screen is lower than that. You can go to the full, what we call the FAQs, because you really are doing this balancing of the huge amounts of information you have to give people with the different amounts of information people want. So we've really got the 3 pieces. We've got the short commitment, we've got this privacy policy that goes into a little more detail, and then we've got kind of the fuller story in the FAQ. As a legal matter, we believe everything on this page constitutes our disclosures that are binding on us. But we did try to avoid the learn more information kind of link, because that's what we heard kind of universally from people they didn't like. And then the other feature here that we also got a lot of feedback from customers is they wanted to know, they didn't want to have to read through everything to figure out what choices they have. And so we have a sidebar here that says you can choose not to receive emails, and here's how you do it. You do that over here. So that's not really embedded in the email.
Notice having to inform people of what's going on, warning them of dangers, is a lot easier on everybody, right? So take the example of, for instance, a blow dryer. So a blow dryer is it's a thing many of us use all the time. I don't actually use it, and less and less I use a blow dryer, but it's something we use all the time. And one of the dangers with a blow dryer, obviously, is that you might get electrocuted, right? You could take a blow dryer and you could make it so that if you dropped it in the tub with it plugged in, it wouldn't shock anybody. You could make a waterproof blow dryer, right? It would just be a hard thing to do. It would be a heavy lift. And so instead of doing that, what we do is we warn the customer, hey, listen, just don't use this in the tub and you'll be fine. Because it's a more efficient, low-cost thing to do. And incidentally, it's low cost not just on the company in this case, but it's also a relatively low-cost way of regulating if you're a regulator. Because rather than have to sort of, dig in deep and do a lot of that kind of thing, I mean, basically what you get to do is you get to say, look, you got to inform your customer, and then what you're checking is a written disclosure. Also, there's a sense in which notice really respects autonomy, right? At the end of the day, we really want people to be able to do what they want to do, right? So if it's junk food or junk bonds, whatever it might be, we don't want to tell someone, look, you absolutely cannot have that supersize gulp at the Slurpee, You know what I mean? Like, that's something you can't do. We don't want to do that. But at the same time, we want to make sure people understand that there are some dangers inherent in that sort of thing, right? And so notice, disclosure, you're going to be having this many calories, there's this much sugar, is a form, a way to navigate that tension between the basic autonomy and danger. And also, incidentally, we want to respect the autonomy not just of individual consumers, not telling them what to do, but we want there to be a lot of room for innovation, and we want to respect the autonomy of a business so that they can do different interesting things, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of reasons why Notice is very attractive. So Notice is really ubiquitous as a regulatory measure, and it has been for a long time. But what's equally interesting is that it fails it also fails in very well understood ways. Okay, so for a long time we've been using Notice, but for a long time, and 40 years or more, we've understood that there are inherent limitations to Notice as a means to regulate conduct. Okay? I'm not going to go through this in unbelievable depth here, but some of it has to do with inherent cognitive limitations that we all share, right? The idea that we can't handle that much information, and we end up relying on heuristics. We end up relying on shortcuts that enable us to figure out sort of what's going on, and those are not always accurate. So the idea here is that we're just being flooded with unbelievable amounts of information. It's one thing to get a blow dryer that says, hey, don't use in the tub. It's another thing to get a car and have a manual this big that explains to you all the intricate electronic systems in there, right? Just too much information.
The first two try to reduce the sense of control people had over the publication of personal information without changing really the access or usage to the data, or maybe changing in a way which would actually, in fact, decrease the risk of the data being abused. In one case, we created this idea of mediated versus unmediated publication of personal data. In another case, we created this idea of certainty of publishing data versus probability of publishing data. And the last study went the other way around. We increased the perceived sense of control over publication, and by manipulating the sense of explicit or implicit control people had on such publication of data. So study one, we had CMU students recruited on campus, completed an online survey. We thought that the survey was about creating a new CMU-wide online social network. And we had questions about student social life. And some were multiple choice, some were yes-no, some were open-ended. And we also included some quasi-identifiers and privacy intrusive and non-intrusive questions, which were rated as intrusive and not intrusive by a different sample of students. Sample from the same population, but not overlapping with the sample which actually took this study. So, for instance, these were the questions that the sample of students different from the sample of subjects who took the actual study ranked as highly intrusive, asking the email address, home addresses, asking whether the student has cheated in homework, whether they cheated in a relationship and so forth. Example of moderately intrusive, date of birth, having a girlfriend, boyfriend. Example of non-intrusive, things like do you do any sport on campus, which courses are you taking in the moment, and so forth. What we manipulated, as I started mentioning 2 slides back, was the sense of control on this publication, whether it was automated or mediated. So whether it would go automatically online after the student had filled out the survey, or whether it would be uploaded by a researcher. So in one control group, the text was, this is the survey, no question field is required, you can skip as many questions as you want. With the answer you provide, a profile will be automatically created for you with no intervention by the researcher and published on this new CMU networking website, and so forth. The treatment group had the same text, only that the bolded part was different because the answer you provide will be collected by the researcher, will create a profile for you and publish it. So we inserted this third party, this new persona in the mix, which allegedly would decrease the sense of control now the subjects had on direct publication of the results, because now there is another person doing it for them. We do give a guarantee that the information they upload will be exactly the same that the subject has revealed, but nevertheless there is less sense of control.